All right, today going to actually talk about game mechanics. Pretty much for the person that is brand new to the whole game and they're kind of like who, what, where, when, why, and how. So this video is going to be all about pretty much like the basics of the games. So pretty much I'm going to do like a quick overview of the player's handbook. Now here's the 2014 book, and of course you got the updated version with the 2024 version. So either or works. So you can grab either or. Now you could grab in a sense previous iterations of D&D, second edition, third edition, fourth edition, first edition, or whatever, and play like that. But with fifth edition being the most recent one, you're probably going to want to get that because that's what most people are using nowadays is the most current fifth edition. So pretty much I'm going to come at it pretty much a generalized view. So that way, like when you watch this video, you can have like a basic understanding. Like when you go in, like, okay, so now I know what's this, what's that, and you can instead of just going in completely blind and you're at your table like sitting down like I am, like, what, huh? This way, when you watch this video, when you go to your first table, like I'm interested in playing D&D. Let me watch this video so I can have like an idea of what to expect when I sit down at my first table, and I can at least have a decent understanding of the jargon that people use. So now, first and foremost, you're going to want to get yourself a good old dice. So, and this is where the whole concept of dice goblin comes from, someone who basically hoards dice. Now, technically, you could get away with just one set and everything to be able to play. So, first and foremost, we're going to work our way from the lowest dice to the highest dice. The lowest denominator for dice is a D4, and they usually come in. This is the ones I'm going to be showing for dice are the most common ones. Now you can get different types. There's ones that actually look like little bullets that you can roll, and they maybe two-sided, uh, or they're kind of tear shaped, and they have the one like in a case like this, the numbers 1 through 4 are on both sides and everything. So when you roll, you sit here and roll, and yeah, this one's small enough so I end up rolling a 4. So this is kind of used for some spells and everything. So the dice that most people are probably most familiar with are the six-sided dice, D6. So usually whatever you hear a D whatever, D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, D20, that's usually the type of dice. Dice 20, the 20-sided dice, D4, four-sided dice. Now the six-sided dice, like I said, are probably the ones that people are the most familiar with board games, things like Hero Quest, Monopoly, probably Risk, and your traditional board games of Risk and Monopoly. They have a six-sided dice that you use for movements, and of course they are numbered 1 through 6. And these ones you're going to use quite often as well. D4, not that often, but often enough where you kind of might want that. So these ones are used for things like sneak attack, spell damage, and some weapons have dice damage or whatever. So whatever damage they do, that's the dice you're going to roll. So for instance, a short sword might have a 1d6 points of damage. So you take just one of these and roll 4. So I do 4 points of damage. So that's the concept of the six-sided dice. The next one are your 8-sided dice. So basically, in a sense, you're taking two 4-sided dice and basically putting them on top of each other. So these are most common with your weapons, like I just mentioned. So for instance, a long sword, maybe an axe or something might do 1d8 points of damage. Or so maybe you have an axe where it might describe you can use one-handed for 1d8, or you can use two-handed for a 2d8 or so like that. Sometimes you have weapons that are versatile like that. The next up is your 10-sided dice, so 5 sides on each side or whatever. So now there's 2 types of a D10. So ones that have like actually tens on them, and then ones that actually have like the regular 1 through 10. So now like the ones with tens, what you're going to do is like these are pretty much used like for percentages and everything. So sometimes you might like have to roll for like a percentage. Now, one thing I remember from back in like second edition is like percentages were very big, especially for like the thief class with their abilities. So like you'd have like a percentage that you would roll, like, so basically you roll two of these and you'd have to get on like your percentage or under in a sense to succeed and everything. You don't necessarily see that too much now in fifth edition, but it's still something that's there. So this is why you want to get like a, in a sense, two 10-sided dice, one with the single digits on it, and then one with the tens on it, so you can roll the percentage. Now, the ones with like the tens on it, it's quite simple to, in a sense, it not use these single ones, but use these as the single ones as well. So like for instance, like if I rolled like an 80 right here, you could just in a sense swap that out and say that's an 8 instead. So that's how you could use percentage dice as a regular D10. Now, probably the least common dice that's out there that is used is like the D12. Off the top of my head, I can only recall that there's like one weapon that uses D12 as damage, and so outside that, I don't really think there's much, if any. Now, people can maybe comment on like maybe there's some spells or something that like that use D12 for damage and everything, but off the top of my head, like I said, I can only recall like one weapon that uses D12. So this is probably going to be one of your most underutilized dice and everything. So if you lose it, you could probably get away with it and everything, but so it won't be too big. So now the bread and butter of like especially D&D or any like game that's based on like a dice roll, like role playing, like Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, Starfinder, Paizo's sci-fi version of Pathfinder, you're going to come across the D20. So this one is probably the most common one you're going to use. You basically use this like for pretty much like ability checks, saving throws, like any skill checks, and like all like that. So yeah, this is pretty much going to be your go-to dice in this game. So like basically numbered 1 through 20. Now the way this works is like usually like the dungeon master DM will set like a DC, a difficulty challenge. So he might say like the DC to do maybe you're sitting there, you're trying to bend a steel bar or whatever. He might say like okay, well the DC is 20 or whatever. So what you do is you roll a D20 against that DC, and you would have to get like a 20 or better. Now, in the game mechanics and everything, sometimes like with that bending of that steel bar, that would be considered a strength check and everything. So, like for instance, me, the barbarian, goes in to does that like bend the bar to maybe intimidate an NPC into doing something I want to do. So I would use my strength modifier to add to that and everything. So, like for instance, the way modifiers for abilities works is that like you get anywhere from like negative numbers if you have like a less than 10, if you have 9 or less you have like a negative, if you have 10 or 11 you have a 0, and then anywhere from 12 on up the modifier goes up like +1 for every 2 points you have. So like for instance, I might be the barbarian with a 20 strength and I have like a +5 modifier, so like I would roll D20, and like I rolled a 14, so I would get like a 19 or whatever. So I would just barely like fail and everything. So that's how like a skill checks would work and everything. And the same kind of concept for like saving throws. You'd have to like beat a certain number and everything, and like AC is like the, in a sense, the difficulty or whatever, like to be able to hit opponent when you're in combat and everything. AC stands for like armor class. Now think of like the knight in shining armor versus like someone like me who's just sitting here with no armor on. It's going to be a lot harder to like hit someone with the and actually do damage to them in that full suit of plate mail that knight in shining armor is, versus like someone like me. But another add-on to like a AC would be like dexterity modifier. So like I might be not like this, not dressed in full plate mail, but I might have like a high dexterity. Think of like your typical thief that I mentioned. Like so I might be very nimble, so I can add my AC like my in a sense ability modifier to the AC. So like that way, your people that like are more reliant on like their dexterity versus like armor for like being able to like, not take damage from attacks can still have a decent level of AC. So that's another way that like since difficulty class works is that your armor class basically when you're trying to hit someone with whether it's a sword, whether you're trying to hit them with a bow. So that's another way to use the D20, and of course like saving throws like is the third way to use the D20. Like a saving throw might be like someone's trying to like in a sense trick me into buying some like a bullshit potion or something. Oh, this is a potion of healing when it actually is like some poison. So I might have to like do a saving throw to resist I might have to rely on my wisdom. Like, oh hey, this guy's like just totally like a thief, and like he's trying to one me up and everything with this potion. He says is a potion of healing, but I know it's a potion of poison or whatever. So like that's another way to use the D20 is a saving throw to kind of like in a sense resist something like or like a strength based like you're sitting there grappling with like your opponent. You might do like a strength saving throw to in a sense against your opponent to in a sense not get lifted up on the ground and thrown over like thrown on the ground or something. So that's another way to use the D20 is a saving throw. So now we get into like going over those uses of D20s. You get into those concepts of like ability checks, saving throws, armor class. So that's pretty much like the three main ways to use like a D20 that you're going to mostly come across like is in those instances. So now I have to talk about like the abilities that I mentioned with like a strength, dexterity, like wisdom. So there's 6 abilities that are on the character sheet. There's strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. So the best way to explain those abilities is like a strength is like your ability to crush a tomato. Your dexterity is your ability to like throw a tomato. Your constitution is pretty much like your ability to eat a rotten tomato and not get sick. Your intelligence is the concept of knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put a tomato in a fruit salad. And charisma is the ability to sell a tomato farmer more tomatoes. So that's pretty much the best explanation that you can have for the abilities. Now the concepts of like AC and like 2 hits and like armor class and stuff like that. That's like in combat and everything. So using the example of like the knight in shining armor, I'm sitting there donning like the whole like front like the in the sense the breastplate that covers my torso. I'm covering the helmets. I got like the whole gauntlets and like the arm sleeves. I got the leggings and everything. Now, the reason why I want to do that is because like someone who's coming in with a sword is going to have a lot harder time. If I have armor and he hits my armor with my AC that add pushing out my armor class, he's going to have a harder time getting through that armor to be able to do damage to me. Versus like if I was just sitting there without any plate like that full knight in shining armor, like I am right here, it'd be a lot easier to do damage like with me without armor than it would be that knight in shining armor. So that's how armor class works. Now, of course, I did mention that like people with high dexterity can add their ability modifier to their AC. So like you do have like some classes like the rogue. I mean, I mentioned that as thief in the 2nd edition iteration of it. 5th edition iteration of it is the rogue, so they more rely on being able to like someone's like swinging a sword, knight in shining armor. He can just let it bounce off his armor. The rogue without having that full plate mail on and everything, he might have to sit there and dodge and let the blade go by him. That's how dex-based AC works and everything. Of course, the idea is that like the more heavy armor that you put on, the less of your dexterity that you can use. So like for instance, the knight in shining armor might not be able to move out of the way of the blade, but like he does have the armor that like lets him deflect the sword swing and everything. So that's in essence how an oversimplification of how AC works. And again, I mentioned like saving throws and how they like work and everything. So getting back to the D20, what you're going to do is like the DM dungeon master might have you like as the evil sorcerer might be casting a spell on you, and you might have to like to resist the he might be casting charm on you, so he can take control of your mind, and then like turn you against your fellow players. To be able to resist that, what like the DM might have you do is like, hey, look, I need you to do a wisdom saving throw to be able to resist that charm spell. So he might say that the DC is 13. So then you pull in the D20, you roll, and I just rolled like yeah, it's kind of hard to see on these, but I rolled a 12. So he like I might be someone who has like a you can see like someone like a barbarian would have a harder time resisting because like rolling that 12, he might have a lower wisdom because barbarian is more based on strength, so he would feel that like say he's trying to cast it on a wizard who has like a or like a druid or a cleric who has a higher wisdom, and their ability modifier might be higher, so they might be able to add a number to that and be able to succeed in everything. So that's how like saving throws work. So like if you failed, you might be like imagine you turn the wizard casts the charm on you, you turn to your friends and just start attacking your friends. If you fail, if you succeed, you can sit there and like imagine your character going, wah, wah. No, you're not doing that again, and you can like, then resist the magic and go continue to go up against them. So that's in a sense how like saving throws work. So and of course that's kind of like an oversimplification of like dice and like the abilities and like saving throws, armor class, and like attacks. So well, with AC, like I forgot to mention, like to actually attack and everything, you're using the D20. So like that knight in shining armor, the armor might give him like a +6 to AC, and like your AC will start off at 10, like regardless. So like that AC would be up to 16 with the full plate mail. So like 10 plus 6 would be 16. So my attack would be to be able that would in a sense the DC to be able to hit and everything. So I would have to beat a 16 to be able to actually break through the knight in shining armor, his armor, to be able to do damage. So like for instance, I might be like the fighter in the group, and I might have like the typical like a sword and shield, and so like with my sword, I might have like a based on the classes and stuff, and I've done videos on that and everything. So like they do have like bonuses to attack and everything. So I might be like a first level fighter with that sword and shield. I might have like a +1 to attack with that sword. Now I do add my strength modifier to that attack and everything. So like for instance, if I had like an 18 in strength, I'd have a +4. So +4 and attack of +1, that would give me a +5. So like what I would do is like roll the D20, and I just like rolled an 8. So 8 plus 5 is 13. The AC is 16. I would actually miss in this instance, and so like one way you might describe that is like well, I go up and attack him, and like well, I roll a 13 and his AC is 16. Well, I go attack him, my sword just kind of cling, kind of clangs off his armor and everything. That's one way you could describe on how you miss, or like the knight actually sees it coming and he just sidesteps. That's another way you could say that like you in a sense failed with that roll. Imagine like of course I roll and like I got like a 17 this time, even without my modifier. I would actually hit. So then like I would actually roll with like maybe I have like a sword that does 1d8 points of damage. So that's where I'd roll for damage. So like I'd roll like 4 points of damage. So maybe as I'm coming into attack, I do like a feint. I explain it like I do a feint and kind of come underneath, and maybe he's going this way to kind of like get out of the way, and I get him underneath one of the soft spots of the armor. That I could explain how I do that, like, oh, I feint like this and hit him on the side and everything, and that's how I do my damage and everything. So it kind of like it could be open to like a role play and how you do things and everything. So that's the mechanic of like two hit versus AC, and of course like it's one of those things like with this video, it's always good to like watch it and come in when you sit down at your table and maybe watch it once or twice or whatever, so you can get a decent like the a lot of the terms in your head and everything, because like there's a lot of terms I just went over and everything, so you might be kind of like AC, saving throw, strength, abilities. So this is why like having videos like this is kind of help like get an idea. Like you get the ideas in your head, then so then when you sit down at the table, you can be like, wait, I remember this from the video. Okay, so this is, oh. And then once you start seeing it in action or anything, like, oh yeah, and so that's kind of like an oversimplification of like a lot of the rules and stuff, and of course they do apply different in essence like the abilities can change the drastically on like what type of character you play, and so that's why like you have like all those character classes, like which of the videos I've done and everything. So like for instance, like I mentioned, the fighter and the barbarian, they might have they might have more strength and everything because they're in a sense the frontline fighters and they're weighed into melee combat. Think of medieval combat and everything. You wouldn't want someone who's like necessarily like old and frail to go into the front lines or whatever. But that old frail person might be highly super intelligent and everything, and so he would pretty much be like your wizard, and so like he would be able to like sit back and be able to understand the arcane magic, which is like another aspect of the game. So he would be able to cast like the spells and everything. So while the barbarian fighter is sitting there wading into combat and everything, he can sit back and be like in a sense pull out like his handy dandy spell book and be like, oh hey, look, I cast fireball and everything. So and then of course like the druid and the cleric might be more highly wise. They might be like you might come up to like a guarded gate or whatever to the castle, and you're trying to like in a sense sneak into the castle. They might be like the druid and cleric might be better like, hey, maybe we shouldn't go like right there, let's look for another way to like oh hey, maybe there's a sewer, let's maybe try and get into that sewer over there. That's where they would shine, is like with their wisdom. Characters like the bards and rogues and stuff relying on the ability charisma, they might be like, oh hey, like walk right up to the garden like, hey, again, I interest you in like our latest like they pull out a bunch of like game cards or something, like, can I introduce you to a game of cards or something, and like pretty much try and seduce the guards to be able to let the rest of the group sneak past and everything. So there's with how like you have your abilities and like of course you also depend on your class and everything that I just mentioned with the several different ones, is like how you would play that character, because in a nutshell, TTRPGs, tabletop role-playing games like D&D here, it's at its core acting and everything. So like you take on the persona of like your character, whether it's the big strong like barbarian, the highly intelligent like wizard, the sneaky rogue that's trying to like won over everyone. You pretty much play a like persona. So like for instance, like if you use a Star Wars analogy, you get to play Luke Skywalker, you get to play Obi-Wan Kenobi or Han Solo or Chewbacca. So you're taking on that role of that character and everything that you in a sense create and everything. So now I'm going to reference my videos for the classes where you can get a general idea of like of those, so you can go back and watch those. And of course there are like in a sense different races too in the Dungeons and Dragons game. There's your typical humans like you and I and everything, and of course we run a wide variety of different types of humans, because like if you look at our world, there's like a many different I don't want necessarily subspecies of humans, but like we've in a sense evolved differently and everything. So like you have like your people that are from Africa, from the United States, like me. People have from Europe or Asia. So we technically we're all humans and everything, but we evolved slightly different and everything. So in the context of D&D, you would have like several different types of like in a sense humans. So like what you could do in the rules is make a slightly different adjustment. So like for using Forgotten Realms, for instance, like you might say like humans from Waterdeep have like maybe a +1 to intelligence because they have like access to a bunch of libraries and everything. Humans from like say the Anarok Desert or whatever, you might say have a +1 to Constitution because maybe they have been living there for like generations and they've had to evolve to be able to survive harsher conditions. So that way their Constitution is slightly better. And it kind of works that way with like your in a sense like your other species. Like elves are more nimble and like more intelligent because they're able to use magic a lot better. So like their ability scores might reflect that in like their dexterity and intelligence. Dwarves are the typical miners and like they delve deep into the earth and like they're hardworking and hardy. So they might be geared towards more like plus strength and constitution. Orcs, the same thing. Like they might be more warlike, depending on how like you rate them up or how you use them in your campaign. So they might be geared more towards the strength. There's also halflings or hobbits in Lord of the Rings. Like they might be more dexterous, being like a smaller stature and being more nimble. So they might be more geared towards like dexterity. And of course, Regis the halfling in the R.A. Salvatore's books might have a higher charisma, so you could justify maybe having a bonus to like charisma and stuff like that. And of course, there's the gnomes and of course there's like a bunch of other races that you can play as well. There's like in several of the other books there's like the Goliaths, the Dragonborns, like you could play like you could even play like as like the orcs I mentioned, goblins. Like you could even write up a gnoll, bugbear. There's like I even have a video on like the Glory of the Giants where you can write up giant characters. So pretty much the possibilities of different races to play is pretty much limitless and everything. So they each have like several different like ability modifiers, pluses or minuses, depending on the which race you play and their culture and stuff like that. So yeah, those are like the three concepts that you're like you're going like want to get to into is like kind of like your overall character idea, like your class, your race, and like your abilities. So you might write out like a roll up a character, like which is like one of the common ones I use is like you roll 46 and you roll like you subtract the lowest, so like 6, 1, 5, and like 4. So I would discard the 4 and I would get a total of 16. So you do that 6 times and you can kind of put where you want and everything for character creation. So I do have like videos on character creations for that, and like one of my first ones was doing character creation for D&D. So like you can place your abilities so you can get like a better like you can place them better to fit the type of character you want to play, because you wouldn't necessarily want to play Gandalf the Wizard, who has like a low intelligence, like an 8 intelligence. He's not that smart. You'd want to play like Gandalf the Wizard with maybe something like an 18 intelligence, and you wouldn't necessarily want to play Aragorn with a low strength and constitution, because he's more like of a fighter type based character and everything. So go in with the kind of concept like of what kind of character you want to like create as well. So like you might want to play as Conan the Barbarian. It'd make no sense to like pretty much play him as like a charismatic thief and everything, when Conan the Barbarian, at least traditionally, like the big strong barbarian type and everything. So go in with the concept of like what kind of character you want to play. Like you could draw from like any aspect of like like a fantasy, sci-fi, like and come in and like what kind of character do I want to play and everything. And then like this one with all the stuff I've gone over, like with the dice and like save and throws, DCs, AC, like attack, and like a basic overview of the rules, so you have like an idea of like, okay, so this is what I can kind of expect from a game. Because like as like I stated earlier, and I'll reiterate to kind of like finish off this long-winded and ramble. At its core, Dungeons and Dragons in any tabletop role-playing game, all it is basically acting. So some of the characters, for instance, I've been acting as in the last several campaigns that my group and I have done. I started off as like our first one. We did a D&D adventure with Candlekeep Mysteries, and we was able to extend it, where we went into like instead of just a one shot from Candlekeep Mysteries, we made it into like a mini campaign where we went into the Shadowfell as well. I ended up playing a dwarven cleric. First time I was playing a cleric and everything, so like and so we had like pre-generated characters because there's a couple people that were brand new, so we got to pick and choose which pre-generated character we wanted to do. I went with the dwarven cleric because it was the first time I was playing a cleric. So hey, look, here's something new that I can try. So in essence, I became a dwarven cleric. Our next campaign, we went through Call of Cthulhu, so I based my character off of Kat Richardson's Blaine Harper and the Greywalker series as a private investigator, and we went to Boston to, in a sense, investigate like the cult of Cthulhu and kind of go through that whole adventure scene. Our latest one that we just recently finished up like was a cyberpunk, and of course I based my next character off of Harry Dresden in the Dresden Files. Of course, like I only used that as the kind of like a name because I was kind of like the ex-police force security guard type of person, and being a cyberpunk, we had these like better than life chips like that were in essence virtual reality. Like just think of those like a VR headsets that we put on. They're actually chips that we put in our brains and everything. So I played him as kind of like the rough and tumble security guard type of player, or like a type of character. So now we are getting into like a Star Wars this next time. So in essence, this next character that I'm playing, I'm actually like I'm pulling out the name Jarlax Lilbanre from Ari Salvatore's, and I'm pretty much going to be playing like the scoundrel type and everything. So there are several different examples of different types of characters that you can play, and like you then like based on like the character videos that character creation videos I mentioned that you can go check out and everything. You write up your character like that, and then boom. First session is usually like it's called session 0. You're writing up that character and everything. So this is like a longer winded video of like me kind of explaining a good basic overview of the whole experience of the tabletop role playing games. So if you're brand new to it, watch this before you go in, so you have at least the ideas rattling around in your head. So when you sit down and like and don't be afraid to sit there and ask questions too, like hey, look, I'm new at this, like how like what am I supposed to roll for this, like how am I supposed to do that, like if you get into a good especially if you get into a good group of people and that have been like playing for like years, maybe even decades, they won't hesitate to sit there and turn around and be like, oh hey, here, this is how like they won't hesitate to help you learn stuff and everything. So this is like an overview of like and how it's, in a sense, how to get into and go about like the whole learning about how to play good old tabletop role playing games like the good old Dungeons and Dragons.